I'm Fred Pike. I'm a managing director here at the GA and GTM practice lead. And I think my middle initials are becoming CMP, and we'll see what those are in just a bit. So traditionally, our clients and most people in the US have had their approach to privacy has been based on some age-old wisdom, just passed down from the ages. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not even going to pretend it's there. What has changed recently is the CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act, which was passed many years ago, but it's becoming much more active and having more of an impact with clients now. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story. We had one client who their outside counsel sent them an email saying, hey, we noticed that if we reject cookies, you're still placing cookies. So that caused a little bit of a panic in the client, and we did some remediation and got that moving. But most recently, they did a new update to their website. They launched a new website, new version of GTM, a whole bunch of stuff, 4 different companies involved. And shortly after that website launched, they got a demand letter. And that really scared them that they were violating some of the CCPA requirements. So where do these demand letters come from? They can come from the California Attorney General, but most often, they come from these troll law firms, which are just out there checking websites and saying, oh, are they applying the right standards or not? And in most cases, most websites aren't really following privacy requirements. So what's in this demand letter that comes from these troll law firms? A couple of things. One, they say, hey, our client is a California resident. You are grabbing information and not properly processing it. And because of that and this civil code, we can get statutory damages of up to $750 per consumer per incident. So that's the really scary part. Per consumer, per incident. If they were doing a class action, for example, you can imagine a lot of people and a lot of incidents. So the money can really add up quickly. Or we can get injunctive or declaratory relief or any other relief deemed proper by the court. Now, remember, these are coming from troll law firms. They're not really going to do this. Really, their goal is, we want $5K to $25K. We want a settlement to just make me go away. That's what these guys are doing. Now, the impact on the client, the impact on most people who get this, all of a sudden that monkey is really awake going, holy cow, what is happening here? And it causes a lot of consternation on the client side. In addition, it may open their eyes to, it's not just California. There are privacy legislations being passed all across the U.S. There is no federal standard, and I'm not expecting there to be a federal standard anytime soon, but different states are following California's lead. And right now there's like 5 active ones, but that we always think about, but there are many more that have privacy laws in legislation, in committees, and will pass at some point. So the days where we can just say, oh, I'm not going to worry about privacy in the US, those days are really kind of gone. So what do you need now? And let's just do some really basic ground setting here. The first thing you need, of course, is a consent management platform. And the consent management platform is what creates a banner, what tracks the user's choices. And there are probably 100 CMPs out there. Google has a list of Google certified CMPs broken down into gold, silver, and bronze. And we tend to work with ones in that category. And honestly, I would say most CMPs are on that list at some level, but we always work with the gold ones. And one of the things that the CMP does is create the banner. So one of the first things you do once a CMP is installed is you figure out, okay, I'm going to have some cookie language, and then I'm going to have the banner. I'm going to give the user the option of accepting the cookies or declining them or changing their preferences or whatever. And this is what you're typically going to see. I'm sure you've seen this hundreds of times as you go to different websites. One thing that you want to make sure you don't do, and a lot of companies have gotten in trouble for this, is you don't use dark patterns in your cookie banner. So for example, a really large, hey, accept, this is what you want to do. This is the button you want to press. And then the decline is tiny little or hidden, in this case, behind the manage options. So that type of hidden patterns, or dark patterns as they're called, are really have caused pretty major fines in Europe and with California too. So you want to stay away from that. Many times we see a cookie banner like this, and I have never understood this cookie banner. It's like, okay, we use cookie banner, we use cookies, you can't do anything about it. Nah, nah, nah. All you can do is accept. It's like, why even bother? To me, that's like, it is legal in like Wisconsin and stuff like that, but this is the type of cookie banner that I don't think is that effective, and I don't understand why it's there. I'd much rather have the option of decline or the preferences. But again, it's not legally required in many states. So that's what, at a really high level, that's what the CMP does. That's what it's doing. It's also tracking and it's tracking the user choices basically. But that's just a part of the solution that you need. That's the front end. You need something that's going to connect to some back end somewhere that's going to tell that back end, hey, the user said, I don't want to be tracked, or it's okay, I'll accept the cookies. And 90% of the time, that back end tracking is in my favorite Google product, Google Tag Manager. So that's where the user preferences are actually incorporated and set to, like the Google tags or the Google Ads tag or the Facebook tag or whatever. All that processing is typically done within GTM. And like I said, 90% of the time it happens there. Sometimes it happens hard-coded on the website, but it's usually easier in Google Tag Manager. So let's say that you're feeling pretty good. You set up a CMP a couple of years ago, maybe. You've got it working through GTM, and you're sitting there thinking, hey, I'm good, right? Things are good. I can relax. I can look out at this beautiful lake with my wonderful dog next to me. But things may not be quite good if you haven't done any changes in the last year or so. If you're thinking, I'm good because I installed this in 2023, well, you're wrong, basically. Things have changed a lot in the last year. One of the big things that came out roughly 2 years ago now, but became a requirement last year, was Google Consent Mode V2. And it primarily applies in the GDPR countries. But if you're going to set it up there, if you have any type of presence in Europe or any type of visitors coming from Europe, you want to set up Consent Mode V2. So that was a requirement last year. And one thing that we see a lot, particularly with companies that are advertising in the GDPR, is that when you are running Google Ads in GDPR and you're sending a conversion to Google Ads, Google requires that the default state is set to denied for analytics, for ad storage, etc. So if this is granted and the updated state is denied, Google will not take it. If this is granted, Google won't take it. What that means is that you can't use the Google Ads in the GDPR countries for remarketing, for audience building, for conversion tracking, things like that. So one of the things that most sites we see fail on is this default state of denied. And think about that a little bit in terms of protecting yourself. If you set the default state to denied, and then for some reason GTM gets blocked or doesn't fire properly or whatever, you know you're covered because the default set is denied and nothing is going to get sent to Google or Facebook or whatever, again, because it's all denied. So it's really a safety net for you, and it's a requirement for Google Ads. The other thing that just came up last month, actually. So normally what we do is in Google Tag Manager, we control whether a tag is going to fire. Like, is a Google Analytics tag going to fire because the user said, yeah, I'll accept the cookies? what we're beginning to see is not only that traffic information is going to get sent to that endpoint, like Google Analytics in this case, but also the consent status. And where this came up from last month is in Microsoft Clarity, which is a tool I really like. It's great for heat maps. It's great for session recordings. It's great for all types of analysis, visual analysis of the website on your traffic. And so Microsoft is saying, you know what? We don't really trust that you have set up this signal correctly, that you have set up Google Tag Manager correctly, for example, that this traffic that you're sending to us, we don't really trust that you have honored the user's consent. So what you have to do in addition is send us the traffic and send us specifically what the user consented to. And if you don't do that, we're not going to create sessions. We're not going to give you a lot of the features that are so prevalent in Microsoft Clarity. So this is kind of interesting because if you're not sending the consent status, then that means you're really not paying attention. If you are setting the consent status, then there's a much better chance that you have set things up correctly and are passing along the right consent. It's not 100% guarantee, but Microsoft is taking that extra step. And it's a little bit annoying, frankly, for those of us who are setting it up, but I understand where they're coming from. So things are changing. These are just two examples, and we're going to see more happening with privacy requirements, I'm sure. So let's talk a little bit about the process by which we go through this. As I said, we start with, in most cases, Google Tag Manager. And when I first started doing the CMP work, I thought, okay, all I'm going to do is bulldoze all the requirements into my Google Tag Manager, and it'll be piece of cake. Just bulldoze all that stuff in, and it's done. Well, what I found in like the last 6 to 9 months, and I've been doing so much CMP work recently, it's just like, it feels like that's all I do. But what I found is that the bulldozer approach doesn't work. You really need to take a nuanced approach, more of a tweezer approach. You can push some dirt in, but you really have to think about, all right, am I doing things right? Have I set this up right? Am I honoring what the user wants? Am I trying to get out of it what I want for my analytics side? And so a couple of examples, the nuance that I think are really important. So for example, the landing page. The landing page is a critical dimension for us. We want to know what were the pages that people landed on. And one of the things that we go through the process of thinking, do we want to track that before the user has given consent or after consent? In many cases, we can track it before the user has given consent, but when we do that, we are just using that landing page as a modeling, as a way to feed Google's machine learning. It doesn't actually record as a landing page that we see in Google Analytics. So if we capture it before consent, it won't actually show up here as a direct session start, which is really important for us as we look at analytics. So one of those nuanced things that I really pay attention to is, can we capture it after consent, but not so late that we lose it entirely? So there's really a little bit of a balancing act there. Another example is with visitor identifiers. And there are tools like lead forensics and like demand base, and there are other ones that basically are going to look at the IP address of the visitors coming to your website. And they're going to say, oh, that IP address correlates to Northwoods, and they are in Shorewood, Wisconsin. Oh, there's my clock going off. Sorry. They're in Shorewood, Wisconsin. They have this many estimated revenues, estimated employees, et cetera. So what these tools try to do is really help you build up an audience of your visitors. Now, how you track that is typically through a GA4 Google Analytics event. So you would think, okay, this is a Google Analytics event. So what the user for this to fire, the user should have consented to analytics. But if you think about what the purpose of this is, it's not analytics. It's really advertising related. You're trying to build up audiences, maybe lookalike audiences. You're trying to set up remarketing campaigns. So the purpose is not analytics. The purpose is ads, even though it's an analytics event, and you would think it'd be analytics, No, the real purpose is ads. So you have to change to that. So those are just two small examples of the nuances that are required in setting up a CMP GTM process. Once we've set that up, we have to verify it, right? We're not just going to make our changes in GTM and not verify. So the way I typically do that is I start by testing in Wisconsin, where there are no privacy laws public. I test from California through a VPN, and then I typically test from a GDPR country, in this example, France. And I will video my testing so I know that at this point in time, everything was working correctly. People's consent settings were being respected, etc. But this is a point in time and things can change, right? So while I like this as a baseline, it's not sufficient. So one of the things that we have been spending a ton of time on is building our very own AI tool to do much of this monitoring. And this is a small part of a very, very large report broken into both a summary and a detailed report. And I've been working closely with one of our senior developers, Jerry Heidenreich here, to do this. And this is an agentic AI tool that it's proving so valuable in just being able to look at any website and say, oh, are they breaking these consent things? What's happening on the website, et cetera? So it does a whole bunch of things. It identifies what the platform is. It doesn't have to be Titan. It can be anything. What GTM they're using, what GA4 they're using, their OneTrust, or whatever CMP they're using, some of the cookies. It just goes on forever. So it does a lot of the stuff that I would do manually and creates it agentically into an AI report, which has just been great. And then another tool we use that I have used for years now is from Verified Data, and it's going to do an intense deep dive into your settings as well. And anything over 100 is a bad score. So you can't even, they're off the chart in this case. They had 26 cookies set that shouldn't have been. They have 22 pixels. So we use tools like that to just make sure that things are working properly. And the one thing that I have discovered with people in setting up CMPs is that they think it's a set it and forget it. And you know what? It's not. Over time, those settings degrade. People add new tags and forget to add the consent settings on them. New marketing snippets get added might be hard-coded on the website. So there are all types of things that drain that initial setting. So you're in the red. You're in trouble because you're not paying attention to it. And what that can lead to, you may think, well, it's okay the penalties, I read about Meta penalties and I read about Facebook, obviously, Google penalties. They're way bigger than me. But the thing is that there are a lot of penalties applied to small and medium-sized businesses, both in GDPR and through CCPA. So thinking that you're not one of the big guys is not going to save you. There can be penalties against that, or you can also get those troll demand letters. So what do you have to do now? If you don't have a CMP set up, you really need to set one up. I mean, we're past the stage where you can ignore privacy in the US. So if you do have one set up, I would strongly recommend going through the process of verification. You can do that using our own AI tool, and we can work with you to do a remediation process to check that. We'll go into your GTM container and make sure that it's up to the latest standards, consent mode v2, the Microsoft Clarity changes, et cetera. We'll take that fine-tooth, nuanced approach to getting this set up. So the final words of advice I have is that we have to start paying attention to privacy in the US. And if you've set up a CMP but haven't done it recently, you really need to look at it. And our ultimate goal, what we really want to do, we don't want to feed the trolls.